Hello, welcome to the UFO Connection. I'm Cynthia Siegel. We have an incredible show tonight. We have a very special guest who is visiting all the way from Australia, Kelly Cahill, and she has a case to tell us about an extraordinary close encounter that I think you're going to be completely fascinated by. And before we go further, though, what I would like to do is thank one of our longtime viewers, Tom Potter, who is responsible for bringing Kelly to the show today. So please join me in welcoming Kelly Cahill. Hi,
Hello.
Kelly.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, this is one of your stops on a lecture circuit that you've been making for the past few weeks throughout the United States and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit about how this close encounter began.
Okay, I think the first thing that I think I need to make clear is that the reason why this encounter is actually considered to be a little bit out of the ordinary is the fact that it actually involved multiple witnesses, in fact 3 separate parties of witnesses in 3 separate cars, 6 people in all, and the subsequent investigation recovered a lot of ground traces, including marks on the field and physical marks on the bodies of 4 of the people involved, including myself. So what we have, I guess, is a case that's very unusual and not often encountered. But
yes, you do have extraordinary evidence, which I would love to go into a little bit later in the show to fill our audience in about. Let's start, when did this close encounter begin? What was the year?
The 8th of August 1993, my husband and I were driving home from a friend's house in the Dandenong Mountains, which is probably about 50 kilometres out of Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And I guess we saw at about twice the height of the treetops from several hundred metres away, something that looked like at first like a blimp, but as we drove closer to it, it looked like a circle of round orange lights. Except in those lights, there appeared to be figures standing in the shadows.
Inside,
yeah, behind the orange lights, you could see silhouettes of tall, dark figures. And I had enough time to say to my husband, look at the people in the windows, when it shot off to the left of us, and in a couple of seconds it was totally gone. Oh, but that was only the start of it, because we continued driving down the road, and about 2 kilometres later we ran into what I guess you could call a wall or a screen of light. It seemed that way to me anyway. I actually had to put my hand up to my brow in order to look through the window at the windscreen, and I still couldn't see a thing. From there on, we actually rounded a corner, and what was sitting in the field on the side of the road was a huge craft, probably the size of a 2 to 3 story building and the length of an Olympic swimming pool. So it wasn't something that was really easy to miss, and we pulled the car over, but we weren't the only people that did. 100 metres behind us, a bank manager, his wife and their friend, who's a registered nurse, pulled over, and another 25 to 35 metres behind them, David, a government law department employee, on his way home actually pulled over as well.
Now, you weren't travelling on the road with these people. You just noticed when you got out.
No, I didn't know these people at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
So basically we stopped the car, got out, crossed the road. I saw a whole heap of, well, actually at first it seemed to be one figure in front of the craft, and then a whole heap of them. I felt at the same time this energy or frequency go through my body, and it's quite difficult to explain it because there really isn't a parallel or comparison, but I think the only way that I might be able to relate it is it felt like a low-level frequency coming in waves through my body, yet it was actually so dense that I could physically feel it, and it literally terrified the living daylights out of me. I mean, when I got out of the car, I was exhilarated, you know. I wasn't frightened when I got out of the car. All I could think is, this is absolutely amazing, and we're seeing something that most people wouldn't get the chance to see in a million lifetimes. And all of a sudden, that euphoria changed to absolute horror. And I really, I guess, lost the plot. I really lost control. I was so freaked out, I started screaming, and...
Was this physically uncomfortable to feel that wave coming through you?
Yes, it was almost like something was interfering with the way that my mind worked. It was like I couldn't think straight. It was like I was fighting to to be able to think properly at all. And all I could feel was this raw emotional terror.
Yeah.
It really was like a living nightmare. And
oh, goodness.
then these beings or figures came across the field. They split up, and at the same time as I was yelling out, their eyes appeared to light up a bright red colour. I don't know whether that's infrared or what it was. But of course that totally freaked me out. So the screaming just got worse. They came across the field, split up into two groups. Some came towards us, some came towards a second party of people down the road. I felt this blow to my solar plexus, and I landed flat on my back in the grass.
Oh my. So you got knocked over forcefully by something that didn't touch you that you saw, but it was something that...
It was like, almost like an electric charge of some sort. It wasn't like a thump. It was like I'd received an electric shock straight in the solar plexus.
Like a shock, huh?
Yeah.
And were you knocked off your feet?
Yeah, literally off my feet and flat on my back on the ground. And it knocked the wind out of me. I couldn't breathe. Right. And I really, really struggled to sit up. I kept thinking I was going to die if I didn't sit up. And when I sat up, I was violently nauseous as well as struggling to get a bit of air into my lungs. And I couldn't see a thing in front of my eyes. And that's how I remained for the little bit that I remember sitting in the grass. I was totally blind. I couldn't remember.
Oh, how terrifying.
Yeah, it was actually. It was very terrifying. I think I really was hysterical, and it's almost a little bit embarrassing to think about how hysterical I was then. But I think it's not until you're put in a situation that's totally out of your control do you...
Absolutely, and you're being assaulted, knocked over, you're losing your vision, and and these red-eyed, terrifying foreign beings are coming towards you. That's very incredible.
Anyway, the last thing I remember was a hand being placed on my shoulder, and I went absolutely ballistic, and the next thing I can remember was being back in the car.
You felt something touching you?
Yeah.
So that was while you were still lying on the ground?
No, I was actually sitting up in the grass with my knees apart. So I was actually in a sitting position. But before I was touched on the shoulder, I heard this male voice say, "Well, someone do something about her." I know it sounds ridiculous.
No, do something about
someone
her.
Do something about her. Exactly.
And you think it was one of those beings that was...
Yeah. Well, I couldn't see. I could only hear. I was totally blind.
Was this a voice you heard coming from outside?
Yes, it was an audible voice. It wasn't,
And it was clearly in English, obviously.
Yes, but I still have trouble recalling whether there was an accent or anything. I didn't recognise one, so I assumed there wasn't anything out of the ordinary with the voice at all.
Did you hear any sounds coming from your husband, let's say, or the people up the road?
Only in the very beginning when I first got hit, and I sat up, and I called out to my husband that I couldn't see, that I was blind, and I heard him say, "Let go of me." And then I heard the same male voice say, "We don't mean you any harm." And my husband saying, "Well, why did you hit Kelly then?" And
so he saw you get knocked off your feet and gasped for air probably afterwards. Yeah.
So, not a very good situation. I actually threw up. That's how frightened I was. While I was sitting down, I literally threw up. So.
Oh dear, goodness! And then the last thing you remember is being touched after sitting up, and then you woke up where?
Well, I was back in the car and totally disorientated. And as far as I could remember on that particular night was us driving into this light.
And then you woke up where?
Well, I was back in the car and totally disorientated. And as far as I could remember on that particular night was us driving into this light. And I couldn't remember what had gone out on the field until several weeks later, actually, until we had driven back up there again. But when I got home that night, the first thing was that we had about an hour and a half that we couldn't account for. It just seemed to have gone instantaneously missing from our lives. Secondly, I was marked with an equilateral triangle mark underneath my navel.
How large or small would that be?
About 9 or 10 millimeters each way. And
what did that look like? The triangle, did it have a color, texture?
Yeah, it was red. It actually looked like a burn, or as if the first few layers of skin had been removed. And I think the most, well, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I noticed it because it was geometric, and I sort of was wondering, well, I wonder if this had anything to do with what we saw up in the sky. But then I thought, no, I'm being ridiculous, so I left that. But I think the main problem that occurred that night was that I'd started bleeding when I wasn't due, and quite profusely, and that continued for 3.5 weeks till I was hospitalised with an infection in the womb, which the hospital doctors had no explanation for. Now, as it happens, the two ladies in the second party also had gynecological problems, quite severe ones, instantly post-encounter. They were also left with the triangular marks underneath their navels.
And what did the diagnosis for that bleeding turn out to be?
Well, there was no diagnosis. There's even on the medical records I have, there's still question marks beside everything. You know, they checked out well, first they did pregnancy tests to even test that I'd been pregnant and something hadn't festered, and that was negative. They checked out endometritis, a whole heap of things, and all that they had was that there was a intrauterine infection, and they had really no explanation for why it had actually started.
Goodness. Now, you wrote about all the details of your encounter in this book, Encounter, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes for the audience and showing them some pictures out of it. So this didn't seem to be related to any pregnancy or anything like that. They just have question marks.
Yeah.
For your case.
Yeah, still on the medical records.
Oh my goodness. And how were they able to? They were obviously able to treat you for this. And what was the treatment?
Yeah, I was placed on a very strong drip of antibiotics for several days in hospital, then let out, and yeah, it seemed to do the trick and heal the problem, but why the problem occurred in the first place is still a mystery, I guess.
Yes.
Anyway, I went forward to researchers. This was a bit of a problem. I knew something had gone on here, and I wanted to do something about it. My husband wasn't in agreement with it, but I just couldn't help myself, and I started ringing universities, and finally the Civil Aviation Authority put me onto UFO researchers, and at that time I had no idea that something like a UFO researcher existed, you know. I sort of thought that I'm the only person in the history of mankind that this has happened to.
So this was a subject you had no interest, no familiarity with,
none
and this
whatsoever.
extraordinary experience happens to you.
Yeah.
And that is really what made you seek out assistance from people in the field. So how did that turn? Now, what about your husband, though? Let's backtrack a tiny bit, if you don't mind. Did he have any marks on his body?
No, he's the only one that actually, yeah, he and Bill, the male member of the second party, seemed to be the only ones that didn't have marks on their bodies.
So out of the 6 witnesses, there were 3 females or 4 females?
There was 3 females and 3 males. 3 females had marks and 1 male, but the other 2 didn't.
Okay. Does your husband, did he have recollection the next day also, or a few weeks later when you went back to that same place?
My husband, he remembered seeing the craft in the sky, and but whenever I mentioned anything out on the field, he would go absolutely ballistic. He would get really, really angry, and he denied it for a long time until about 2.5 years ago, when he finally came out and said, you know, admitted that, yeah, he remembers what went on out in the field, and he has memories of it too, and he's also seen these things at other stages throughout his lifetime before this, which really surprised me after all these years of him denying it. But you have to understand, he comes from a Muslim background, and everything to him was anything to do with UFOs or this was totally demonic. So his idea was not to touch it, not to think about it, not to do anything with it.
He was trying to deny this whole event occurred.
Yeah,
now,
forget it and it'll go away.
Yeah, which obviously, as you know, doesn't work. Now, what about your background? What is, you said he was a Muslim. What?
I was a strange marriage mix here, but I was a full-on Pentecostal Christian at the time, which probably explains half of my reaction out on the field, because, you know, I thought I'd had a run-in with Satan himself while I was out there, and I think, you know, my hysterics had a lot to do with that.
I think having an upset reaction has a lot to do with everything. I mean, what an incredible amount of traumatic events to happen in a short period of time. So his reaction after was he didn't want to talk about it, and you obviously felt the need to do so. You had had physical problems. Did these physical problems end when you came off the IV, or were there some lingering physical effects that occurred after that?
There were still effects after the encounter. I think for about 9 months I had massive migraine headaches and extreme sensitivity to light and to noise. That seemed to clear up eventually, but this seemed to be immediately post-encounter effects. Whether that's from, I don't know what it's from, whether it's from the frequencies we felt out.
Had you ever had migraines prior to this?
No,
and you were
never.
getting them how often?
On a daily basis. Some days I couldn't even get out of bed. They were so severe, all I'd want to do was feel like I was going to throw up all day, and I just couldn't lift my head off the pillow.
Goodness. And the doctors said what about these migraines?
Well, not a lot. I was sent for CAT scans, and there didn't seem to be any major problem at all.
Nothing was showing up in the medical tests, and they just
so it was
sent you home.
Yeah, and a few painkillers, and well, what else? It's a bit hard to tell doctors, oh, hold on, you know, I had this UFO encounter, maybe this could be linked to it. It just, you know, you just don't do things like that.
Right, right. Okay, so now you had started to lead us into the talk about contacting researchers in Australia?
Yes, in Australia. Phenomena Research Australia was the people that I eventually got in contact with. And I'm very thankful that I did, because they have now gone ahead and done what is considered to be probably the most thorough scientific investigation ever done on a UFO case in Australia.
And who is was it an organization or one individual?
No, it was an organisation, but it was headed by John Orgatel. Although it ended up expanding beyond that, the Monash University of Melbourne got very deeply involved in the on-field data collection and analysis as well. So
now this is very remarkable. Now we in this country, when there's a UFO case or a close encounter, the universities don't jump on board, and people don't start usually jumping on board to do good quality research. But you had a reaction like that over there. You were very fortunate.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky. And
now were UFO phenomena, was that commonly talked about or researched
actually,
in Australia?
It's definitely been research going on for many, many years. There's been a lot more cases than will ever be brought out in public, but it wasn't an issue that was dealt with in public at the time.
So your case really was pivotal in bringing...
Oh, it opened it up. Opened the media up in Australia incredibly. Yeah, it was. But the research itself, I just want to go back to that for a moment.
Absolutely.
The on-field ground traces and data took 18 months of investigation. There was no expense spared. There was aerial surveys, infrared photography from the air. The magnetic readings taken were taken by a portable magnetometer, $250,000 worth of equipment, and only one of two in Australia.
Wow.
So they basically went all the way, and I've seen photographs of several acres of the field cordoned off into 1 metre blocks with pegs and ribbon, and samples were taken from every single block, and several times actually, and sent to two separate individual analysts. But the ground traces included a triangular mark out on the field that was first thought to be burns, but ended up being the chemical pyrene, which is a carcinogenic, cancer-causing agent, but it does come naturally in small quantities in areas such as coal lodes, but geologically it shouldn't have been in this particular position, and certainly not in a triangular formation.
How large was the triangle formation?
The triangle was only, it was an equilateral triangle again, but the marks were only 20 feet apart. However, there was another very large magnetic anomaly in the shape of a semicircle. And actually, if I show you the picture of the craft we all drew, this is the original craft that I actually...
Here, tell you what, let's hold it up for the camera and we'll let them do a close-up. Okay, we're going to use this camera, correct? Which one are we using here? All right, this camera's going to do a close-up in a moment. And there we go. All right, now I'm going to point to the one that we're talking about first. Now this one right here is the, I'm going to make sure there's no glare on it. This is the drawing that Kelly, you did. How long after the event, the close encounter, did you do this drawing?
Within about 4 or 5 weeks.
4 to 5 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. Were you asked to do so?
Yes, I was. When I first contacted the researchers, they asked that I submit anything that I could remember, including drawings and written documentation of everything that I remembered. The second...
And the reason you didn't do this sooner is because you were having that medical problem for the first 3.5 weeks, certainly.
Oh, the reason is that I hadn't gone forward to researchers, you know. I mean, that took a bit of courage, and it also took a bit of research to even find out where to go to.
Yes.
But the second group came forward 6 weeks after I did, with the same story and drew the same thing, yet they weren't aware that I'd already been to the researchers, and they weren't told about that either until approximately 9 months after the investigation had started, after the encounter. So
how did these people know to come forward? Was there some publicity involved?
No, none whatsoever.
They on their own, just like you felt in need to seek out?
No. What happened was that there was an advertisement put by the researchers in a local paper, because I'd insisted that there was a second group of people behind me. But the advertisement was very carefully worded, and it was basically to do if anyone had any unusual activity in this particular suburb. And what they did get was a whole spate of UFO sighting reports. And then they got this one phone call of these people saying, look, I don't know if you're going to believe this, but we had this really unusual experience. And then they mentioned the name of the road, and I mean, those sort of things weren't in.
So it wasn't just actually the people on the ground. There were a lot of people that had seen an aerial sighting of this as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's the same object, but...
was it the same date? And the same general...
Well, I don't know. I haven't got... That's the researchers' information. I just I was just told that they got so many calls in for aerial sightings.
Right, and they didn't say UFO sighting or anything, and yet they got a whole series of calls about this. Very compelling.
So basically they were kept unaware of our presence that night, and the sketches they drew were without ever seeing mine or having any clue of what I'd drawn. The same as the beings on the field, they drew very similar sketches to me.
Very similar, absolutely.
And what we'd seen wasn't the usual little grey that most people may have seen in the media. These were 6 to 7 foot tall and black.
Let's take a look at the drawings that the same witnesses, the same 2 women who drew the craft and yourself. So we'll do a close-up of this, and again I'll point to the... Okay, I'll point to the first one. This is the one right here that Kelly drew. And, oops, crooked, sorry about that. And the ones on the other page are by the other 2 witnesses who also did the same drawing, did the similar drawings of the craft, completely separate. Did these 2 women talk with each other before they did their drawings? Were they friends?
They were friends in the same car. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the unusual thing is we all did the same thing. All we drew were a face and eyes, no nose, no mouth, no anything else.
Did they feel that the eyes were red as well?
They don't remember the eyes lighting up red, simply because when they were on the side of the field, when they first crossed the road, they saw the craft, they saw the beings, they heard a humming noise, and that was it. They were unconscious. So they didn't even see the beings come across the field and split up. They did see them there. So our stories slightly differ, but they simply because we had different experiences at the same place, but they did take researchers back to the same place. And,
so you might have been the only unfortunate one that got knocked off her feet.
Yeah, I might have been the only unfortunate one that managed to stay conscious for a little while longer. I might have been better off if I hadn't.
Yes, truly difficult one. Goodness. All right, so let's keep talking about during the investigation with this researcher. Did you find this helpful to find out that the other witnesses had seen a similar thing when you did? Yeah.
Well, it's sort of, by that stage, I was really starting to think, God, I must be going crazy. You know,
Absolutely.
This must be some form of psychosis or something like that, but because it just couldn't be real. And I think that was the greatest effect on my whole life, actually, is that all through my life I've been taught that strange things like this, they don't exist. And I believed in science and academia, and all of a sudden, here I was faced with this reality that something did exist. And I'd been told that this just didn't exist, so I'd never contemplated it. And I started realising, hey, these guys don't know what they're talking about. There's just opinions, because they didn't really know. And I think that's where your whole concept of logic and reality gets shaken to the very foundations. With myself, it was almost like I had to go right back and start to question everything I'd ever been taught in my life. And ask myself, is this truth or not? And I have to find the answer for myself.
Oh, what a difficult search. Very difficult. I bet that's been quite a difficult struggle to, especially since the general public, although, like I said, you're fortunate that the media and the people you turn to for help were at least willing to assist you rather than giving you very negative feedback and just ignoring you and leaving you alone to deal with it without information.
Well, I think the Australian media actually took to this so well simply because for the first time they had something physical to look at. They had ground traces to look at. They had marks on people's bodies. Glenda from the second car and David from the third car had amazing ligature marks around their ankles,
which implied what?
Well, Glenda says that she recalls being strapped down to a table, you know, a relapse, I guess, of consciousness, and she said she was in a room and she was strapped down to a table. Don't ask me, but the ligature marks seemed to say something, you know, that she was strapped down to something, or something tight was around her leg.
How many people had ligature marks on their leg?
Just two, her and the lone male in the car behind her.
Now, he came forward to speak with the researchers and share his experiences, but he has never wanted to come public.
Yeah, he actually didn't come we didn't even find out anything about him until 1996, 3 years down the track. Apparently, very early on in the piece, they'd gone to other researchers to tell their story, and no one had been interested, and it hadn't been linked up, so no one knew that he had anything to do with this, and they'd got a little bit disillusioned and decided that maybe they'd better just keep it to themselves. And it wasn't until they saw a story in a magazine, an article that I'd done, that I thought, you know, hold on a second, this sounds exactly like what he went through. This was his wife encouraging him that he's got to do something about it, of course.
Yes, just as traumatic for the spouse as the person going
and he was also left with the same marks on his body that the two women in the second car had, which was a series of 3 dots on the inside thigh.
How large might these dots be? Like a puncture dot, or a brute, you know, like the end of a pencil eraser on the end?
Yeah, about the size of the end of a pencil eraser. 3 red spots in a row.
That never fade in color. Is there any tenderness on these spots, for instance?
Not that I didn't have them. So not that I'm aware of. I'm just aware of the markings. I've been given photographs of the marks. But,
now, do you still have your triangle?
Nah, it went about 5 months afterwards.
5 months.
Yeah. Actually, at first it was red, and I thought, well, this could be a burn. Then it healed to be the outline of a scar, a triangular scar, which suggested more that it might have been a cut or the layers of skin removed rather than actually a burn. I didn't realise, of course, how important that was until January the following year, when the researchers said, well, hey, you're not alone in this because the other two had it as well. And that was a real relief. Yeah, so...
Now, have you since, you know, met with the other witnesses and become friends, perhaps, or shared experiences?
No, I didn't understand that at first. All I thought, you know, we've been through this and no one else in the world has experienced this. It's like, well, I really needed them because I wasn't having the support from my husband at all that I needed. In fact, he was angry at the whole thing because he just wanted me not to tell anybody and let's go on living the way we were living.
And yet don't even talk about it with him.
Yeah. But they at first they weren't even told about us until July 1994, so I had to wait all of that time.
Almost a year later.
About 9 months after they came forward, they were told about our presence that night. They hadn't seen us ahead of them, even though I'd seen them behind us. And they did go public. They did a lecture at a university and 2 radio shows that I know of, but I only learnt of those in retrospect, or I would have been there. And they decided that they weren't going to do it anymore. That Bill was terrified of, his position as a bank manager if anyone found out, and it was the girls who'd actually been speaking, and so they all just decided that it just wasn't worth all the trouble of going public, and they decided that they were going to leave it behind and really didn't want to deal with it anymore. There was actually a lot more to it. There was a big court case that went on over revealing their personal information in public and a lot of other things.
Who was it that...
With the researchers and the second party. So there was a lot more complications that went on than meets the eye. But
now, writing this book, Encounter, which you wrote in 1996?
Well, actually I didn't. It was published in 96, but all of this really comes from the journals that I was encouraged to keep by the researchers. It was like, write everything down, and maybe one day it can be used as reference material or something. And it was a form of, I guess, a form of therapy too. But more than that, I've gone back through my old journals, and sometimes I'm amazed at how much you forget over the years. And it's like, oh God, I forgot all about that. It might be a little incident or a little insight, and it was really good to write it down. But the book basically came from that, and from an interview that was done on tape.
And what compelled you to write this book? Was it something that felt therapeutically valuable? Did you want to share it with a larger audience?
Not at first. That's why it took me quite a number of years to do anything with it. I didn't really want to share it with a lot of people. It was even telling my best friends was a bit of a problem, but the support that I got from them really encouraged me a lot. But it was actually researchers and other experiences. I got to meet quite a number of, actually now it's in the thousands of other experiences now across the globe. But by then I'd met several people, and everyone kept saying to me, listen, you've got the ability to actually get out there and do something. You've got physical evidence. You've got 3 parties of witnesses, and we've been in our situations alone. We haven't got what you've got to get out there and tell people, hey, there's something going on. And basically, I think I got pushed into a little guilt trip there for a while.
You're not doing your part for society.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yeah, hey, you've got a job to do, girl. And eventually I got around to doing it, and I was quite surprised at that a big publisher like HarperCollins snapped it up. And
what kind of reaction did you get to your book?
Oh, very good, actually. Media went crazy on it in Australia, and actually that's where a lot of media attention turned to UFOs from there on in, and actually a little bit before my book. But I think I was one of the first, probably the first experiencer to go so full on in the Australian media, and I was on current affairs programs and in academic journals and so on. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, I'm not an unintelligent woman, so it's I know it looks crazy, but someone doesn't get up there and make a fool of themselves and invent an absolutely stupid story like that when they know how ridiculous it sounds. So the purpose behind it, you know it's going to look stupid, it's going to probably ruin your reputation or whatever, but when you've got a truth to get out there, it's really important, and I just thank God that a lot of people actually did listen, which is,
You're very fortunate. It didn't ruin your reputation, and you live in it did ruin
my marriage.
Ruin your marriage. I don't want to use the harsh word, but okay, that's unfortunately what happened. But you live in a small town now,
yes,
so in
I
Australia. And how do your fellow townspeople feel about your experience, or is there any,
feedback from it? Yeah. Well, actually, my next door neighbour is a pastor of a church, and within weeks of me moving in, he was on my doorstep saying, I heard you wrote a book. And he said, oh, the boys have been talking about it. So, but I tend to stick to myself a lot. I'm a very private person, so I really don't know what people say and think.
Well, nobody's coming
No
up
one
and
will do it
saying
purposely
anything.
to me. Actually, the only person having any problem with it at the moment is my oldest. She's about to turn 13, and she's going through that stage where everything about her mum's embarrassing, and this just makes it worse.
Oh, dear.
Once upon a time, she used to be really proud of this, not anymore.
Yes, well, that's
it's just that age.
Yes, it's being a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
So now you have 3 children, correct?
Yes, I do.
And how do the others, has there been any experiences that you know of that your children have had? Or have you had, and, well, let's start with your children, and then...
well, I certainly hope not.
So none that you know of,
No,
that your
none,
children have not had any encounters or visitations?
No.
Do you feel you've had any visitations or encounters since that August 93 event?
Yes, I had, for 5 months after the encounter, I had what I term as night visitations. I had woke up on 4 occasions to see one of these tall, dark beings standing right beside my bed. Whether it was a sleep phenomena or something, I don't know, but it certainly seemed real when I woke up. And well, enough to scare the living daylights out of me, so that, you know, it's only been 2.5 years since I've been able to sleep without the light on again. So, you know, when you've been that scared as an adult that you've got to sleep with the light on in your room, you know, it's, to me it was very, very real.
Now, the being that you saw in the follow-up visitations, night visitations, did they appear, as best as you could tell, to be the same being?
There's only one.
Okay. Did it appear to be the same as the 7 beings? How many did you see out in the field that night? We didn't.
7 or 8.
7 or 8. Did it appear to be the same?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I was pretty sure it was one of the same.
So, other than the sort of teardrop-shaped head with the red eyes that appeared to glow, is that an appropriate way to describe it? What about the rest of the features?
Okay. Well,
I'm sure.
Beside my bed, it seemed to be wearing a cloak.
Huh. Like a cape?
Yeah.
Down to the ground? Or?
Yeah, and a hood on it. And it's really actually quite strange because Glenda from the second party, I only found out probably 2 years down the track. I was given more of her diagrams, and where she says she came back into consciousness and she was strapped down to a table, the being that she woke up and saw was also wearing a cloak. So there's a sort of a little coincidence there.
Yeah.
But out on the field, I really can't tell you about their bodies, because when you see this huge mass of glowing red eyes coming straight at you, you're not looking at anything else but the eyes, you know. I mean, you're not worried about the colour of their fingernail polish. It just doesn't enter your mind.
But it appeared like when cats' eyes, you know, the light hits them just right at night.
No.
Was it that kind of a red eye?
It was like
Like a stoplight on the street.
It was like a red hot glow on a stove. That sort of glow.
Very interesting. Wow. I would be terrified. Who wouldn't be terrified seeing something like that? And I can't even imagine waking up and standing on the side of my bed as some red-eyed creature with a cloak on. That's
dear
goodness gracious.
That first time it happened, there was no way I was going back to sleep that night. I was sort of
I'm surprised you
absolutely
ever went back to sleep, Kelly. To be honest with you.
well, at least it only lasted for 5 months. You know, there's a lot of people that I speak to.
How often did it happen during that 5-month period?
4 times.
4 times during 5 months. And what happened during those night visitations?
Okay, well, the first time I could feel this. I was asleep, and I had a very vivid dream where I could feel this presence in my dream, and something said to me not to be frightened of what was about to happen. And I felt this suction on my chest, and almost like my chest had turned into an elastic band, and something was sucking something out of me. And then I got a bit panicked, and it eased back into me a little bit. And then it started again, but really, really strong, and that's what woke me up. Like energy or something was being drawn out of me, but it really made my chest feel like it was an elastic band. And when I woke up, that's when I saw this thing standing this far away from me on the side of the bed. Yet here's the difference. In my dream, when I was asleep, couldn't see anything. It was just a presence. Only ever in all of these dreams, when I woke up, did I see something. In the dreams, there was never anything to see. It was just an awareness of a very strong presence of something. And what I did notice is the same absolute horror energy that I had out on the field was the same thing I felt when this thing showed up.
Oh dear. And what happened next when you had that feeling of horror? How long did this last? Did anything happen, like any physical marks the next day? Any communication? Did you have missing time that you knew of?
No, it just seemed to just stand there and look at me, and then it was gone. But I just got the impression that I might have won this time, but you know, there'll be other days. That's the whole impression. It's almost like it was there long enough for me to realise that, hey, this is real, and then it wasn't. And yeah, it wasn't a good year, I think, after that. It sort of all, and that wasn't all that happened. I tend to forget a lot of things, but we had some very strange electrical phenomena going on around the house.
Oh, interesting.
We had major appliances blowing, light bulbs going all of the time. You know,
what do you mean? What do you mean, blowing up or turning on and off by themselves?
We had the TV turning on and off by itself. My husband's car would turn over in the driveway, like it was like the sound of a car that's been flooded, with a kill switch on and the door's locked, and he'd run down to try and find. Yeah, he'd run down to try and find the thief, and the car's still locked, and the kill switch is still on.
Oh my gosh! And no key in the ignition, and the car is going.
Yeah. And
oh my!
So this is to me, and I was getting electric shocks from things that shouldn't conduct electricity, like rocks and soil and wood and things out in the garden. I kept getting these shocks all the time, and I really think that, especially with the car, that somehow whatever we were in contact with out in the field had some sort of electrical charge or something that had started to, well, not only affect our bodies, but you know, mechanical things like the car as well. So it was quite an unusual time.
Wow, how long did those strange
that stuff went on for about 9 or 10 months.
So you were having migraines for about 9 months.
Yeah.
You were having strange electrical effects, and then they dissipated, stopped abruptly.
Yeah, it just seemed to disappear. It just seemed to stop.
And so the night visitation stopped after that 9 months as well?
No, they were only the first 5 months.
First 5 months. So after 9 months after, as far as you know, you have had no experiences?
Well, not anything like that, no.
That type of an experience.
Yeah.
Now, have you had any experiences at all prior to August 93 on the road?
Well, there's only one experience that now makes sense, and it didn't then. In 1991, I was living in a Melbourne suburb, Laylaw, and I was very, very pregnant with my third child.
9 months pregnant, right?
Yeah, very
pregnant.
And
minutes away from due date.
I woke up in the morning lying spread-eagled on my huge stomach, balancing on the bed with my arms and legs sort of off the bed, with my son kicking me, and my waters had actually broken, and it was really hard actually to get up off the bed, and I don't even know how I got in that position, but I got up and I started to walk towards the door, and I noticed my nightie was on inside out. And then I thought, when did I, you know, that's a bit stupid putting that on backwards, and I asked myself, when did I put it on? And I could not remember going to bed. The last thing I remember was sitting out in the lounge room, and it's the first time in my life where I hadn't remembered doing something. And I sort of, ticked over in my mind, and because I was going into labour at that very time, sort of the concern about it lasted till about as far as I got to the bedroom door, and that was it. There's other things sort of took precedence over it. But I also came up with these marks on the side of my legs, which were like deep grooves and that were dark purple, and they all seemed to come up around the same time. And it's only now, after I've learnt a lot about UFO experiences and everything, that they're the classical scoop marks that a lot of UFO experiences actually have. And if you actually feel them, you can feel what feels like a hole going down through the muscle tissue, right down like a punch biopsy.
So you still have that mark on your ankle?
No, on both of my calves.
Both of your calves? Yeah.
So that does look like something else strange happened there, but
yes. Now, was the birth healthy, normal? Everything went fine when you went to a hospital?
Yeah, well, I had to be induced, but yeah, the birth was fine.
And your son is how old now? This is your youngest?
Yeah, he's 8.
And look at that big smile.
He's a cutie.
He's a cutie.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. So he's 8 years old now. And is there anything unique about him that you've noticed that perhaps you think is
well, he's Mommy's little angel.
Unlike the 13-year-old. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
He used to be Mommy's little angel. And will be again soon. Yeah, so there's nothing in particular about his health or his thinking, philosophy, mental capacity,
well,
everything?
He's a very, very compassionate child, but whether that's got to do with the way that, you know, different children are raised, you know, you learn by your mistakes, I guess.
Otherwise,
yeah, otherwise
he's regular, everyday, wonderful kid, huh?
Yeah, that's it.
Ah, well, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, in looking back, that's very nice that everything went smoothly. Well, so this is an absolutely extraordinary case. I mean, the amount of evidence you have between the landing marks and all the things that happened to the soil. I know that I have a little list here, if you don't mind, just to summarize things for people.
That's fine.
The evidence that you have. Let me get the soil effects here. There's 6 soil effects that I got now. What I'm reading off of now, just so people know, is off of an article that you wrote that is on the internet through the, let me just double check, MUFON LA website, because you were just down there doing a presentation for them as well, along with a lot of other places. Kentucky, Canada, Northern and Southern California. And the 6 soil effects. Now, you had mentioned that there was it tannic acid? Is that the
tannic acid is probably the strange one because it was it should have been dissolved with all the rain. It was actually coated in an unidentifiable waxy substance, which seems to be a residue left from...
Yeah, what's the waxy substance? That's incredible. Is it plant material or wax? I mean,
it was...
What a strange...
I couldn't really identify it, except that it was... You know, it was waxy. As I said, it seemed to be a residue left, and it was only in this crescent-shaped magnetic anomaly. In fact, all of the soil changes and changes in the chemistry were confined to that crescent-shaped magnetic anomaly and the ground within that.
So, out of the entire large area that they tested, most of the
everything was inside of that. Yeah.
Now, there also, how was the foliage of the area?
Oh, that's very interesting, actually. All of the foliage in the crescent area, including blades of grass, leaves, everything, was covered in what looked like little holes everywhere. It's like a constant abrasion through everything. And this little hole effect seems to go further because it was actually in the soil as well. The soil seemed to be filled with little air holes, as if water had been drained from it very, very rapidly, like some kind of...
rapid dehydration.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a little bit similar to what happens in some crop circles. That's very interesting. They've had that happening, the hardening of the soil, the rapid...
the compacting, exactly.
Yeah, so the compacting from the pressure, the minute air holes. Also, there was a great deal of sulfur present in that crescent.
Yeah, an extraordinary amount, actually, in the semicircle. Sort of... But after my experience, all I could think of was a fire and brimstone. So the sulfur comes in really well there, doesn't it?
I wonder if that's where that original association came from. You know, that's very possible. Very interesting. Now, the and the other cross-reference that we have between you and the other 2 carloads of witnesses, a total of 6 people from 3 different vantage points. Well, the 6 of you were along the road. What you all share together is, as we saw earlier in the show, the drawings of the crafts that were all drawn separately, yet clearly, you know, you all saw the same thing, the drawings of the beings. You and some of the other women had similar medical problems after. Did any of them experience the migraines like you did, or any unusual electrical effects around their homes?
I am not sure of the... Actually, you're now asking me questions that I should have been asking myself. Thank you. Now I know what to ask for.
Call that research.
I have been, you know, I am aware that they've had some kind of visitations afterwards.
Oh, they did?
Too. Yeah, the ladies did. As for electrical phenomena, I don't know. Bill did seem to have, that was the male from the second party, did seem to have one unusual factor with his experience, is that directly afterwards he started losing quite large clumps of hair from out the back of his head, and within a very short amount of time he developed quite a large bald spot. So there seems to, I don't know whether it's effects of radiation or what it was, but...
Now, did you have any reaction as if you were exposed to radiation or anything like that?
Well, this is what makes me keep thinking back to the Laylaw, the incident that might have occurred 2 years before, was that I got very, very ill after that, and I started losing hair by the handful.
This was right after the birth of your son, after the event where you woke up.
And I actually had to...
oh, dear.
I actually had to be rushed to hospital with what was supposed to be appendicitis, and they did an emergency operation on me at 1 o'clock in the morning. But first they did a blood test, and one of the signs of appendicitis is that your white cell count goes sky high.
Right.
And yet when they got inside, all they could find was some sort of inflammation, and there wasn't anything wrong with the appendix, just the whole inside of me had become inflamed. And what I find is unusual is that radiation has the same effect, that it sends the white cell count soaring, and you know, sort of all happened around the same period, and it really makes me think that
that you might have had some radiation exposure on the event that occurred before the August '93 event that you talk about in this book. Now, your book Encounter is not available at the moment. You have sold out of all your copies, and people are going to just have to wait while you find another publisher in the hopes of making it available, or if they're very lucky, they'll find it in a used bookstore, but it's not available at the moment.
It hasn't been published in the United States yet.
Now, if people do want if people want to reach you, however, are you open to hearing from some of our viewers here at the UFO Connection? How would people get in touch with you, Kelly?
Usually by email.
Okay. Would you be willing to say your email address for people?
That's fine. It's all lowercase, expo, E-X-P-O, at i-o.net.au.
Okay. Read it one more time. Say it one more time.
Okay. That's expo, E-X-P-O, at i-o.net.au.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate that you're willing to hear from our viewers. This is truly an incredible case. And if people do want to learn more, even though they may not be able to find your book, perhaps they can find more information about you on the internet anyway. Do you feel that there's any site in particular that might be more accurate for...
MUFON?
MUFON, okay. Go to MUFONLA.com. That's the one. Very good. I'm glad you feel that's responsible. MUFONLA.com will have accurate information about Kelly Cahill's case. Her last name is Cahill, just so the viewers know how to spell that when they're typing it in. Well, Kelly, this has been incredible. Like I said, we're very honored to have you here. We really appreciate your making a special trip up to Sacramento just to be on the UFO Connection. It's been an enormous treat to meet you. And again, I want to thank Tom Potter for being responsible for bringing you up here and hosting you up here. It's been a treat. And I'd like to thank you for joining us here at the UFO Connection with our extraordinary guest all the way from Australia, Kelly Cahill.